Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today, our guest is Ray Perkins of Derby Line, teacher turned author. Welcome to the show, Ray.
Well, thank you.
So, you are a well-known teacher, and now you're a well-known author. Which one do you like doing better?
I enjoy both. I retired from teaching about 1.5 years ago, and I found I really missed it.
Right.
Although I am enjoying doing the writing piece.
Right. But you know, I've read your books now, and you're still teaching though, in a way.
In a way I am, because I'm writing stories that I hope will inspire readers.
Right. Now, it was interesting. I posted you on one of my links on Facebook, and I don't know if you read it, but somebody actually wrote how much of a mentor you were, and they were happy that you had. They were happy that you were doing well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you've mentored other people into the writing world as well?
Well, I hope that I have inspired people to at least take that chance.
Right. You know, were you always were you like a kid that just loved to write, or were you like me that if a teacher saw me now, they'd think, how the heck did that ever happen? Because I had no talent whatsoever. Were you one of these people that could hammer out a story when you were 5 years old?
No, not at all. In fact, much like you, I kind of shied away from writing, and I didn't think that I had much talent as a writer. And really, it was not until I got into college that I started feeling comfortable with my writing.
Right. Well, that's kind of what happened to me, because when I graduated from high school, I was actually feeling weak in writing. So I had an advisor who was a playwright at the same time, and he said, you need to take some writing classes. And I took some writing classes. I have a degree in psychology, but I ended up being a writer. So yeah, that's where I came into my own. So,
well, it's interesting because I think that I gained so many writing skills when I started teaching.
Right.
And my first teaching job was in Coventry, and I was required to teach the writing process to my 7th and 8th graders. And part of that was writing yourself and showing the kids, just modeling for them. And I learned so much there that I thought, well, I can do this.
Yeah, because you probably also had to, unbeknownst to your kids, you probably had to go back to some of the basics. Okay, what is a prepositional phrase and everything? And you kind of had to probably relearn some of the stuff that maybe you'd never learned, or maybe you'd forgotten.
Oh, very definitely. Because I was, at the time, also teaching grammar to 7th and 8th graders. And so, yeah, it was just a really good review of all of that.
Right. So, when did you begin writing? I don't know if you professionally or semi-professionally.
I did a little bit of writing for the Chronicle when I was in college, covering some sports stories. But it wasn't until I started teaching and started writing with the kids that I wrote the story, the idea for the Mystery of the Silver Statue came up. And I wrote a short story and shared it with the kids, and they loved it. And so from there, that's where that story was born.
Right. Yeah, actually, when that was published, I remember you came on my radio show and talked about it. So I know a little bit about the mystery of the Silver Statue, but tell the viewers a little bit about it.
Well, the story, because I'm a history teacher by trade, I wanted to write stories that I thought would be fun reads for kids, but would also teach them some history.
Right.
When I first wrote the book and I shared it with an agent in New York City, he said, how are you going to separate yourself from all the other writers for kids? How are you going to make this story different? So I decided that my main characters would be modeled after my two oldest sons. Mm-hmm. And the main character in the story, BT, actually had a brain tumor when he was 5 years old, just like my son did. Mm-hmm. And I saw all of the struggles that he had to overcome. So I included that in the book, hoping to inspire other people. The Mystery of the Silver Statue is about the Madonna that was stolen in Odanak, Quebec, by Rogers Rangers in 1759, and on their way back from Quebec, the statue was lost and has been lost ever since.
Now, would you label this as historical fiction?
Well, I had a writer interview me for this book and she said, I think it's a history mystery.
Oh, that's true.
So that's kind of what I have entitled it now, is I write history mysteries.
Right. And oops, right in mid-sentence. Sorry, Todd. I didn't screw up at the beginning. So when you do a history's mysteries or historical fiction, you still have to have some core facts in there. Like, for example, if you're going to talk about Rogers Rangers, you had to have done some research.
Correct. And really a lot of that research came in college when I took a Vermont history class with Senator Graham Newell, who's now deceased, but he was absolutely my favorite professor in school, and really because of him I think I wanted to share history and how exciting and how interesting history could be with kids, and that's why I decided to teach, and that's why I decided to write about history as well.
I often say, because people say to me, how come you don't teach history? Well, history is a hard thing to get kids interested. It's even sometimes hard getting people until they're in their 50s even, until they see a bit of their own mentality. But with kids, you're living in the here and now. And how did you get kids interested in it?
You're right, it isn't easy. And I think that the way I connected kids with history is by using their own family history to try to explain to them that, yeah, this history isn't just out there for you to read, but it can be really closely connected to what's happened to your family or this area.
And then you could branch out from it. That's what I was on Vermont Public Radio and talking about history, and my philosophy is very similar. I said, if you can tie some history local, it's like, for example, although I'm not a sports fan, this is the home of, this is Boston Bruins territory. Well, for local kids, you could expand. Well, the fact of the matter is, Charles Adams, the founder of the Boston Bruins, a man who brought the NHL to this country, was born and raised in Newport Center. And so then you could expand upon that and just branch out. So keep the history a bit local, then expand outwards.
Well, and as I was teaching Vermont history to sixth graders, and I refined my story about Rogers Rangers and how that event all took place, it just dawned on me that the kids loved it. So they were ready to go out and start hunting for treasure after I talked about this story. So I thought to myself, this is something I need to really write down and get kids interested in.
And I'm sure during your research, there's so many different versions of Rogers Rangers. There's the Abenaki version, there's the European version, and then there's different ones. It's like then trying to find out which one is truth, and we probably never exactly will know.
That's right, and it really amazed me. After the silver statue came out, I went to a program at the library here in Newport, and Dan Taylor was doing a presentation on Rogers Rangers, and I learned more at that one. I'm like, oh my gosh, my book's out, but I've learned so much more.
Yeah, I hosted him down there, and because Dan is if only I had his research skills. He's a methodical researcher. Although he lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, he's a Barton boy, born and raised.
Yes, he is.
And so then, talking about Barton, the title of your next book, The Mystery of the Brick Kingdom, and I recognize that the town of Burton might just be the town of Barton, and I do know there's a brick kingdom there.
Well, it could very well be, and I just want to say I'm a Barton boy as well, born and raised there, and did my schooling in the area, and then taught for 29 years at Barton Academy. So I have a real tie to the area.
So the brick kingdom in Barton was an once a strong industrial area.
It was really a thriving place and a model for a lot of other towns around the country in the 1800s.
And there's not really much left of it anymore.
There really isn't. The Youth Conservation Corps built a walking path through the kingdom several years ago, and that has kind of deteriorated. And a lot of the buildings have. The roofs have caved in. Some of the walls are still standing. And I just thought one day as I was looking out my classroom window toward that direction, wow, it would be great to have an adventure in there, but also tell kids about the history.
Right. You know, there are still people in their 90s who are still alive, like Ray Griffin of Glover, or retired dentist. He actually worked in one of those buildings before he went off to war. So there are still people who remember when it was a thriving industrial community right in that, along that river.
Yes, and my father-in-law was still alive, was sent to fight in World War II, and he had just been married for 2 weeks, and his wife, Jean Leclerc, actually worked there as well, making ammunition boxes.
Yeah, that's always interesting when you can, you know, when you have somebody who, you know, you look at these, you know, you and I look at those old buildings and they're just old buildings, but for other, you know, for them that's...
Well, there's so much history.
Right. You know, if, as they say, if those buildings could speak. So,
Yeah.
but basically the mystery of the Brick Kingdom, that was out of your childhood, or out of your realm of reality in Barton.
Correct, and that's what I like to write about is, I think I write best about things I know. And even though I have to do some research, I also, it comes from my experiences and my memories.
Now, like Howard Mosier, who I know well, Howard, what he does is he does a very similar thing. He starts off in a lot of his stories with a core bit of history, but then he expands upon it and goes in every which direction. It's like, for example, Stranger in the Kingdom. That occurred. That's truth. But there was no murder. But so he kind of does a little bit different of what you do.
Well, and I think I expand that way on this new book as well, because the Brick Kingdom was there. I'm not sure there was a mystery of a lost treasure, but I use the place and the history behind the place as sort of the setting for the book, and then bring my characters from the first book in looking for this lost treasure.
Yeah, tell me, you said two of the boys are after your two boys?
Are modeled after my two oldest sons.
So tell me, when your oldest sons read it, do they think it's anything they would have done?
I think they do, yeah. I think they're kind of excited and say, wow, that's pretty neat.
So now, well, you know, there isn't a lot of money, as you know, as being a writer. It has to come from your heart.
Definitely.
But you're now on a mission to actually give away 50% of your proceeds. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, because my oldest son had a brain tumor when he was 5 years old, and that's who I have modeled one of my characters after, I decided with this book that I wanted to give back in some way. So I contacted a number of cancer organizations, and the one I felt most comfortable with was the American Association for Cancer Research. And I decided, after talking to them, that I would give 50% of the proceeds from the sales to that organization.
How has I've seen you in the paper, I've seen you on TV. How is it going for you?
It's actually going quite well. I was just at a little harvest festival the other night up in at J. Westfield School, and I'd been up there a couple of weeks before, and I was just mobbed with kids. They were thrilled to see me, and they were so excited that I had my new book, and it was just wonderful.
So you're getting a following.
It seems like, yeah.
Right. And does it probably makes you feel good that, well, you know, we talked the first time when your first book came out, the feeling of putting that first book in your hand. Now, how does it feel knowing that you're also helping people at the same time?
Well, it is a really good feeling, and I hope that you know, people will will understand that this is a way for not only me, but them to contribute as well, just by, by donating.
So how, if somebody wants to see these books and they want to take part in this fundraiser, how can they learn about it?
Well, there are a couple of different ways. I'm going to actually be at the Barton Public Library on November 3rd in the morning to do a book signing and talk. And I'll also be at the Wood Knot Bookshop. My books will be there as well. And I'll be at Wood Knot on November 10th, I believe at 11 a.m. My website is probably the best place to go to gain further information. And the website is mysteryforme.com, and it's the number 4, so it's mysteryforme.
We'll put it up on the screen too.
Great.
So you've gotten 2 books underneath your belt. Is this it, or are you already plotting?
Oh no, I'm already plotting. I have 2 books in the works, and Lynn Leimer up at Haskell is hoping that the next one is going to be there, because I was up last year when the paranormal investigators were up there, and I said I'm going to write a book called The Mystery of the Haunted Opera House, and so that's my plan.
It's kind of addicting, because I don't know about you, I can't remember what you said after your first book, but I think after my first book, there was a period of time where I said never, ever again. Because it's fun, but by the time you finally you finally go through the editor, you go through the proofing, and then you're just like so exhausted that it's like never again. But then that book lands in your hand, it's like, yep.
And that's pretty much it. I can remember saying to my son, oh, I can't do this anymore. I'm done with this book. It's like, I've had it, but now I'm actually thinking about, getting started on the next one.
So is this a series?
It is. It's the, I'm calling it the BT and Jimmy Adventure Series, and people can also access it on Facebook at facebook.com, BT and Jimmy.
Okay. So is the next one, is that going to be part of the series?
It is. It's going to continue. I think I definitely have ideas for at least two more books, and I have kids at Barton Graded School and at J. Westfield who are coming up with ideas for new books.
I had an author on recently, and we talked about the writing process and how we go about it, to make sure we're fairly accurate. When I write history, it depends on the topic. Like when I wrote about the history of the Clyde River fishery, I had the fishery biologist read it for that angle. I had, I believe that one would have been Howard Mosier, just for kind of like the flow of it, the storytelling. And then I had a retired, actually he was a current Fish and Wildlife warden, read it, just to find out, to look for different things, to make sure I was accurate. Do you have anybody read your work?
I do. My wife Mary does the first editing and reading through, and the crazy story with the Book Kingdom is that I was sending her chapters, and as I sent her chapters, she would send me back comments. And I got to, I think, chapter 11 and stopped, and she wrote me back, "This is great, but I'm confused. How can you end the book right here?" And so then I wrote her back and said, "Oh, no, this isn't the end. I have 2 more chapters." So definitely, I will get it out to certain people. I have a teacher in Barton, Carol Reynolds, who does great editing as well, and she looks it over for just those kind of things. So this doesn't match up, or that doesn't match up, or what are you talking about here? How does that work? So yeah, I have some people who are willing to do that.
Because, I don't know about you, but after I've handled a document too much, I can't see mistakes anymore. And we have a funny way of doing things. We know how we meant to write it, so our eyes, if we leave out a the or an of, our eyes just fill it right in, and it takes a person who's a little distant from it. Now, I'm glad you and Mary are able to work out that, because my wife and I, we do that to a degree, but sometimes she doesn't want to tell me what I need to hear. Or, and to be honest, sometimes she tells me what I need to hear, and I don't want to.
And you don't want to hear it.
And I don't want to hear it.
Right.
Whereas I'm much more open to a stranger telling me it stinks,
Definitely.
But it's a process.
It really is a process, and one of the things I found worked well is, and I'm not sure my kids will agree with this, but I will sit down in the chapter and say, Kendra or Nick, listen to this, you know, what do you think? And I'll be really excited and read through, but my 17-year-old daughter will say, yeah, okay, Dad.
Oh, yeah.
But just reading it out loud is helpful for me, because then I miss some of those things, and I will go back and say, oh, that's not what I meant.
You know what I think we're kind of lacking in this area around here is we have like arts people. For years, they kind of did their own thing, and some of them still do, but then now they've almost, they have cohesive little groups now, and where they actually sell each other's works and everything, and there's so many writers in this area. You know, some of renowned like Howard Mosher and Ted Hoagland, but then there's people like us, then there's all kinds of people, but I think writing is kind of like, it is in a way it's a loner type thing, but on the other hand it's nice to sit down with other people who know the struggles.
Yes, and you were so helpful a couple of years ago when the silver statue came out, and you said to me, and I was really a little bit taken aback when you said, the easy part's done, you've done the writing, it's going to be hard to get out there and market it. And I thought, well, does Scott know what he's talking about? You definitely knew what you were talking about.
Because I'm going to tell you, the reason I say that is I can sit down, I can write books all day long. For me to get out and peddle because you have to almost brag about yourself in a way, and that doesn't come natural, especially for Vermonters.
Exactly.
Is you have to get out there, and I'm not good at that. And I'm a Facebook guru and everything, but to actually go to these things, because you don't just go to them. You are, they can be tiring too. It's great meeting the people, but you have to be ready for questions. You have to be, if you're doing a speaking engagement, it takes preparation.
Oh, sure.
And you're thinking, geez, I could be back writing right now.
Right? And just, setting up these things and talking to bookstore owners and talking to people on the radio. I'm doing a radio interview with a lady out of Louisiana at the end of this month. And, I'm not really sure what to expect.
Yeah, that's it. But then once you get the flow going, you know where to turn to, the next book becomes a little bit easier because especially if you're, like I publish my books now through my history magazine, Vermont's Northland Journal, which, that's a direct forum for me, which I have a lot of outreach, but without a publisher, publishing company is a double-edged sword.
Really
is they help you distribute, they set up the places, but as you know, your profit margin is like, wow, I worked this long, and they throw me a bunch of peanuts.
For this little, yes.
Yeah, and so if you can set up your own network, it's a lot of work, but once you get it set up, you're pretty much golden.
Right, and that's what I'm attempting to do now with going out on my own with this second book, and I decided that I would really do it all, from the writing to the editing, and finding my own editors, to the actual publishing and printing through CreateSpace on Amazon.
Yeah, oftentimes people who don't write, they just see the end result, and especially when you're going to do it, when you're going to distribute yourself, they don't see all the phone calls, the emails, just to set it up, and then you have to. Fortunately, I am blessed with a wife who is so much in the details. She keeps the books. Like if it relied on me to do the books, we'd have the IRS being the guest because I don't even balance a checkbook.
Yeah, it's just a part of the whole process that is really very difficult for me.
So your name is on that book. My name is on my book, but realistically, I bet you your wife really, her name might not be on it, but I bet you she's really a big part of
Yes,
it.
she's a big part of that, as is my illustrator, who is my daughter-in-law,
Right.
and who graduated from RIT in New York, and is an amazing graphic artist and designer, and also the mother of my granddaughter. So she just does wonderful artwork.
Right. And I think when you write, it's one of those obsessive compulsive things that everybody else in your life is going to know about, as you were saying. And in your case, since you used your two boys, I can imagine they're hanging out with you. Uh-oh, we better watch what we're doing. Dad's gonna.
Now what? Right? Is he going to use something?
Right.
Definitely.
I wouldn't go back on my decision to write myself at all. Would you?
No.
Would you
No.
have started it earlier?
I think, yes, definitely I would.
What held you back? Is it just life?
Well, yeah, it was part of that. With raising children, my wife and I were both teaching. There really wasn't a whole lot of time for that. I was writing, but there wasn't much time for doing the marketing and how to get that out to publishers. And after several rejections, I would put it away for a while, and then when the story of the silver statue came back up in my history class, I'd get excited about it again. I'd go back to the book, I'd do some revisions, I'd send it back out again, I'd send it to an agent. And it just, things didn't work out.
See, what happened with me, Howard Mosier, who has been a great mentor to a lot of writers around here, Howard told me, he said, and this is a famed writer, he might have to submit a story up to 100 times or rewrite a story. But so I got kind of spoiled. He gave me a recommendation, and my first book I ever published, I sold the first try.
Wow.
And that has been all downhill since.
Yeah.
Now, actually, it hasn't. But all right, talk about time. We only have about a minute left.
Okay.
Again, how can somebody check out your work and maybe take part in your fundraiser?
Well, the best way is through my website.
And again, it is
mysteryforme.com, and that's the number 4.
right.
And also on Facebook, you can follow me at facebook.com/BTandJimmy.
Right. Any last words about your work? Anything about the future?
Well, I just want to say I hope that my work inspires people, because the young man struggles to overcome his disabilities from the brain tumor. And I just want to let people know, not just kids, because a lot of adults are waiting for this second book to come out. Perseverance. Keep trying, keep at it, and good things will happen.
Yeah, I think it's great that your work is touching a multitude of areas. Not only, I enjoy your books, even though they're young people's books. I've enjoyed them because I like history. But on the other hand is, you might be a retired teacher, but you're not retired from teaching.
Right.
So, all right, I just want to thank you for coming on the show, and you'll have to come back on when your third book comes out.
Well, I hope you invite me back. I appreciate you having me.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.